right, Abuna, it's all yours.
All right, let's pray. Our Father, name the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but from evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and glory forever and ever. Amen. Okay, if you guys can turn on your cams, would be great. Um, First of all, um, as usual, I'm sorry for communication. When I'm in Cali, I'm in Cali mode because then I get into it there. Um, and then in Canada, I'm in Canada mode. So just so you guys know, I'm a jerk to everybody in California while I'm in Canada. So it's not a one-way thing until we figure this out. So I'm gonna have announcements about all the where we're going, communications. I'll be back on the WhatsApp group soon. And there's this cool app that came out. Don't worry, I'm not asking anybody to switch, but it does what I've been dying for, which is my problem from the beginning, that it actually amalgamates all of your chats into one, including iMessage, including WhatsApp. And that was my major issue, is not having 45 million platforms. So we'll talk about all of the organizational stuff at the end, but we'll do Lent first. Mina Yusuf. Um, all right. So it's Lent, in case you didn't notice. Um, and so what I had in mind for Lent, if you guys are down, I'll send you guys a link to it. I wanted to do the priest that raised me growing up, um, Father Athanasius Iskander in Kitchener. He wrote a book called Practical
Scander.
Spirituality. I don't know if you guys have studied that before. Have you guys done? Have you? Okay. No. Okay. Then I was thinking the way that so that book, I really love it because that book was it was what confession looked like to us. Um, and so it's got like I think it's practical, just like the title says. It's got exercises at the end of every chapter for people to try throughout the week. Um, Maybe some of the examples might seem dated to some people right now, which is no problem because I'm not going to just read the chapter out loud, but to use it as a basis. So what I was thinking is that for each week in Lent, maybe up until maybe the week before Holy Week, we can use that as our theme. Um, that way, we're kind of all on the same track together. Having said that, um, I know I'm not almost anybody's father of confession here, which is no problem. So I'm not saying that to try and get clients. What I'm trying to say is during Lent, make sure that you have booked an appointment with your father of confession. Um, like Lent's meant to be like our athletic period of the church. And so usually what my priest used to say growing up was whatever your date of birth is, um he was like choose like that the number by what date of the month closest to that you confess. So if you're born on the 23rd, then choose a date close to that, just to get people going. I really don't care, just make sure you book an appointment. For those that are confessing with me, the schedule is going to be up soon. I'm gonna like, today it's already up actually, so that we can start meeting up and doing all that nice stuff. But what I wanted to talk about before we start using his book, we'll use his book starting from chapter 1, not the intro, next week, is today I kind of wanted to revisit both spirituality that we had just started to talk about. Um, um, Sorry, I'm ADD. It's Practical Spirituality, Christina. And I'm going to send the book in the WhatsApp group once I'm back in. Um, I want to talk about spirituality in general, but also specifically about asceticism, because what we were doing before I left was I wanted to just like rethink what spirituality, faith, all those kind of things mean, because I think we had maybe not had a right perspective on it, culturally anyway. So we did that. I'm not going to revisit all those talks about faith and doubt and about all those things. But what we were trying to arrive at by the end of it, that I hope that we were able to do, was to get into the sense of objectivity, and that a human being isn't just body, right? That a human being is body, soul, and spirit. And so if we're going to look at body, soul, and spirit, soul just consider to be kind of like what makes a thing alive. Okay, that a human being or an animal is made out of the same elements of the earth. We're organic, but for some reason, when you put these ingredients on a table, they're not alive, but in a human or an animal, they are. So soul is referring to just the whatever it is that animates material, whatever it is that just makes it alive. Some people will consider that the circulatory system. I really don't care. Consider whatever you want. Soul is just saying something is physically alive. But spirit is what we were getting to, is being like the image and likeness aspect of the being, right? That's what we were talking a lot about before we left. That for Christians, when we talk about what is it to do right, we're not talking about some fluffy concept out in the air somewhere. We're talking specifically about an absolute rightness, right? Which is to be like God. And that is what it meant when God took Adam and Eve and breathed into them and said, receive the spirit, right? Let us make man in our image, our own image and likeness. Abuna Joseph in Ottawa, he's got a book, God willing, coming out soon. It's amazing. It's a fiction book. But he wrote something that I thought was really, really cool in his intro for when you guys read it. He said, you know, when God created animals or creatures, whatever it was, he spoke to the earth. Let there be light, let there be animals, let there be this. He goes, but when God created man, he spoke to himself, because we're meant to be that reflection of him. So we spoke about how the gospel, specifically the Sermon on the Mount, is a main source of it, tells us how we're supposed to be. Okay. It says turn the other cheek. It says walk the extra mile. It says all of those things. Now, the issue is that it tells us what to do, but it doesn't tell us necessarily how to do it. Like it says be meek. How do I do that? Right? It says be humble. How do I do that? Right? Or how do I choose between humility and walking the extra mile if my ego is getting a gray rub by my going the extra mile, for example? How do I choose? What do I do? So we find ourselves regularly in different positions, right, where we don't know how to do things. And so what the church has for that I'm hoping, that's when like I'm wanting us to be practical spirituality, because he goes to them, is the Desert Fathers and mothers, actually. And that's not me just being politically correct. We have some hardcore political, some hardcore desert mothers, where actually there were some monks that only went to a spiritual alma and not to a spiritual father. They are kind of like the scientists. They're the researchers for that. Okay, so what the Desert Fathers and Mothers did is when they stopped being able to get massacred, right? That martyrdom was a big thing for the first few centuries of the church, and people took it as a big like pride that they were ready to die for the truth. When that died, people didn't know how to offer themselves anymore, right? They were used to their life being on the line literally for being a Christian. So when that wasn't a thing anymore, they all got up and started following St. Antony and said, well, let's live like we're dying. So they went out to the monasteries, right? And we'll have a talk at some point about monasticism and desert spirituality and all of that when we do a special series. But what they did is when they went out there, they said, you know what, let's live this to the max, right? So imagine like if you got to go to some boot camp that's run by Olympians, right? Not by your local, I just want to be fit kind of person, but by Olympians. That's what the Desert Fathers are for us spiritually. What's really, really neat about them is that they were saying, let's find out what causes me to do wrong, right? Let's find out what are the remedies. Let's find out how do I get virtue. And what's really, really, really compelling about it is that they were so variant in how they went about doing it. But what was really cool is that their conclusions are near identical. And we're talking about different locations, different places, different disciplines, different styles, different personalities, right? You've got solo, you've got communal, you've got all these things going, and they came to that. But just to reframe, is that the goal of of right conduct is to align my human spirit with the Holy Spirit. Okay, so the goal is that whatever I do, I'm aligning somehow to absolute truth through the gospel. What that means for you practically is the way you should frame any question you have, and we talked a little bit this way before I went, is what is the right way that a Christian approaches insert decision behavior here, right? So if I want to know, should I take this job? I should be asking, how does a Christian go about deciding about this job? Because obviously there's not a verse in Matthew 5 that says thou shalt take the job, right? But I would want to look at the factors that are affecting me of, is this going to take me closer or further than living the image and likeness of God, right? And then what you might want to get with that is some spiritual guidance, which is its own separate talk that maybe we'll also have during this Lent, because I think we should have a talk about discipleship and guidance and what that looks like. So all that was a crazy long intro to get into asceticism, which is maybe another word for spiritual workout. And that Lent is the season for. So I'm going to still make you guys try and answer some questions if that's okay, but it won't be as interrogative as before I left. So I'm going to use Desert Fathers all over this talk, and hopefully you guys can jump in. So a brother asked Abba Sisos. He was a disciple of Saint Antony, the best saint in the world. So this brother is coming to this Abba and he's saying, what is the good? What's the point? Which sounds exactly like us, which is another comforting thing. The Desert Fathers is they're really normal, as much as you might not think that. What's the point of going to church? Because whenever I go to church, the devils recognize me and they seize me. He's saying, like, I don't know what the point is. Whenever I go, the devils own me. My thoughts are all over. I'm thinking bad things. I'm not into it, right? Like that's what he's meaning colloquially. And the elder said to him, there's work in the matter. There's work to do, right? Which is probably not the answer he was expecting, right? That we often like to blame the devil for stuff and we ignore the work that we've got to do, right? And so that's obviously Shoi's answer is you've got work to do. And then Abraham talks to this same elder, Abba Shishoi, and said, okay, Abba, what if, okay, there's going to be a liturgy on Saturday or Sunday, or sorry, not a liturgy, what's called a magma, a congregation, where a synaxis, where the monks come together and they chill together. And a brother drinks 3 cups of wine because they drank and it wasn't grape juice. Is that too much? And then Abba Shishoi says, if Satan didn't exist, 3 cups wouldn't be too much. But because Satan exists, 3 cups are too much. And we're going to see a lot of talk about wine. But there's a point that we're going to get to in all of this, okay? Is what is this mindset, right? What is it that we're talking about? Why could anybody care less about 3 cups of wine or non-cups of wine, right? What is this work? And the question that I have for you guys, how do you show somebody you're in love with them? Peter, you've got your hand up, my bad.
I was just going to ask, because I was reading about this recently, that they used to have a rule that if you, and correct me on this, I think it was the 3-cup wine rule, like if you're not supposed to drink more than 3 cups. Because
it depended where you were.
There was like, depending on where you were, but it seems like it was a kind of widespread rule where it's like, rule of thumb is you don't drink more than 3 cups of wine or something like that. And it, like, I can't remember what was the story, but it was like a father who was getting poured some wine, and then after a second cup, they started pouring. He's like, "Stop, brother! Do you want me to?" It was just kind of a funny, like.
I think we're actually using that one in this talk. Oh,
Oh, is it? Okay, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I think so.
It's just an interesting. Yeah. Anyways, continue.
So how does one show somebody that you're in love? I will totally entertain the awkward silences, guys.
With hearts.
With heart emojis. None of you guys have ever dated or been engaged or married or anything? Like none of you have ever had any interest in another human being in any way? I'm sure you've watched movies and TV shows. How does one show that somebody's in love with someone? Chocolates and flowers. That'll win them every time.
Actions, Abuna, with actions.
Actions, like what?
Like, I don't really know. I just, how do I explain this? Like, you just, more like actions and verse words kind of thing. Like you do what you say you're going to do type of thing, or I don't know. There's lots of talk, more like actions towards that person. So
you give them time.
You give them time. Okay, excellent. Okay, so actions, dedicated things, time is what I'm going for. Chocolates and flowers, actually, like I LOL, but it's true, right? That sometimes it's sprinkling gifts at somebody. Like that is actually a real form of showing some kind of affection, especially when you could have chosen to use that money for something else. There was an aspect of self-denial. You could have bought yourself something, right? But instead you chose to use that money for something else, for someone else. Okay, so let's bring it back to the health analogy we talked a lot about before I left. So how do I achieve health or recover health, and how do I lose health? We have at least 2 doctors, at least 3 doctors on here that I can see on my main screen. Any one of you, just go for it. How do I achieve, recover, or lose health? Don't be awkward, guys.
How do you achieve, lose, or recover love?
Yeah. Christina.
I don't know if I understand the question.
Like with health as this objective thing, there's such thing as a healthy person.
Uh-huh.
How do I, if I'm unhealthy, achieve it or recover it? Or how do I strive to be healthier? And how might I lose health?
I guess it starts by knowing what kind of things make our body healthy. So like what our body needs in terms of nutrients, exercise, those kind of things, and trying to achieve those and strive towards them and avoiding the aspects that diminish it. That's kind of a vague answer to the vague question.
That was exactly what I was going for. I was asking generally. No, that's exactly what it is. And I'm drawing the analogy because I think we talk about spirit because we're talking about spirituality, asceticism, but we talk about spirit like it's this like floaty orb thing, right? That hovers around us, right? And that like I get into Zen mode, right? And that's how I got spiritual. And then if I speak more breathy, right, and more calmly, that makes me more religious. And if I can warp my body into some yoga pose, I've somehow connected with my inner self. No, the spirit is a thing, just like health is a thing, right? And that just like what you're talking about, I want to avoid those negatives and re-achieve positives, find out what it is that's missing. That's true of the spirit too. But the language for spirit is vice and virtue when it comes to health, right? That vices are mistakes. Those are things that cause injury or that remove me from good health, right? Virtues are signs of health. And just like I could be healthy, I could still, as a healthy person, strive for health excellence, right? I could say it's one thing for somebody to be fit, it's another person for somebody to be jacked, right? And the same thing is true spiritually. What's up, Doug? Is that I can also work my tail off spiritually to not just be healthy. I can also work to get jacked. Okay, now when it comes to spirituality, we're talking about all those varying levels. We're talking about maintaining health, we're talking about recovering health, we're talking about getting jacked spiritually. And to understand that, we need to understand purity or chastity. And when I talk about that, I'm not talking about sex, although that is a thing. I think that somehow the church narrative got lost in purity always being about sexual purity, okay? And that's not, sexual purity is just chastity. That's a particular kind of purity. But I'm talking about purity in general here because I think it's something that we've lost, that we have to understand if we want to understand spirituality, okay? Because chastity, sexual purity, is a sign of love. Why? Because you're preserving something for just your lover, right? And I want us to use this lover language when we're talking about asceticism, okay? Now, there's a reason why, I mean, everything's changing now. Open marriages weren't really a thing, right? In that when I have something that's only for my spouse, I'm showing them this exclusivity. I'm saying, I only value you in this way. That's why cheating is still a big deal, and it's a thing of songs and pop culture until now, right? Is that you're trampling on something that's so sacred between me and this other person, right? So God uses this romantically with us, right? That your purity is not just a sign of self-control. It's a sign of your devotion and your affection, right? You're not staying monogamous in your relationship to prove to your partner that you're able to, right? That's not the objective, right? The objective is not being, oh, let me just show you that I know how to not have sex with everybody I see. That's great. That's a good skill to have. But that's not the point of the skill within the marriage, is that you're trying to show them something very romantic, right? In your doing this. And so the Lord speaks about things with jealousy in the Old Testament to bring our minds to this love, right? When he says, I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, right? And it doesn't mean jealous in the new colloquial sense that's sinful, where we confess jealousy as a sin. Jealousy in its right context is saying, I have this sense of belonging, of ownership, right? A parent better be jealous over their child. A spouse better be jealous over their spouse. Not of saying, I want that. It's saying, no, this thing, this person is mine. And I'm guarding it like it's mine. I don't want anyone to touch it, defile it, hurt it, affect it, do anything to it. That's what jealousy means in its truest sense, right? And so God uses that language about us to talk about that he's in love with us, something we don't think about very much, right? We tend to think of it as, I Lord God am a jealous God of being like, okay, have no fun, don't talk to anybody else, blah, blah, blah. That's not what he's trying to say. But we need to recover that mentality. So chastity, when lost, makes a person cold, right? So for example, if you've met somebody who's fallen into some major loyalty sin, okay, they backstabbed their friends, they've cheated on their wife, they've done something, often you'll see that they have this cold feeling of like, all's lost. What's the point? I don't even know if we can do this anymore. It affects them ontologically, right? Until you look for something new to love, right? You find something new and then suddenly you regain that jive and that energy and all of that. So like I said, chastity is not just about sexuality though. I'm just using an example because it's easy to understand, but it's anything that presents as an impurity in ourselves that becomes an obstacle to being able to live the law of love, right? And putting it another way, it's like not loving something for what it actually is. And I'm going to elaborate that on a minute, okay? But if we want to get grace, if we want help, if we want to have this helping relationship, then we've got to be in a relationship, okay? So purity in this relationship with God is about rejecting anything that's unacceptable to that relationship. And we've talked about, before I left, what that means, because we're not talking about rules here, right? We're talking about our nature, right? The example that we're using before I left was not being angry that I'm not a bird, right? Of being like, I can't be mad that I can't fly, was the example that we used, right? Because it's just a waste of time to be mad about that, because you're not a bird, right? So if you want to be upset about it, go for it, right? So we talked about the so-called rules not being rules, but they're more about objective realities of health. So purity, when it comes to spirituality, is saying, let's get rid of the things that make me sick. It's saying, let's not have MSG. It's saying, let's not add this ingredient to my food that makes me sick. It's saying, let me not go work in a factory that I know has lead poisoning, right? It's saying, let me get out of the things that externally could affect me and making choices about the things that I can do to keep myself healthy. And so let me try and give another analogy. Okay, the analogy to me is, I think we might have used this before. Think of, yeah, we did. Think of the cold cup of water in a glass transparent cup. Okay, that when I have this cup, it's pure glass, it's transparent, I can see right through it. That's purity. And let's say that's how I look through the world. This is the glasses, okay? And I'm seeing the world through that. Once I put in food coloring, mud, dirt, whether I put it in or someone else put it in, or I was in an environment that's just dirty, whatever it is, when that starts getting in the water, it becomes murkier. I can't see as clearly. I could arrive at a point where I can't see at all, right? But I can't see well anymore. My glasses have a different colored lens. And because they're different colored lens, I can't see things the way I'm supposed to see them anymore, right? Purity is being back in that state, right? That's what it is. I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about everything. Jealousy taints that. Envy taints that. This is just so we can tie it all together. The vices that we're talking about, that's what taints it, right? My lust taints that. My anger does that. My selfishness does that. All of those change how I see the world. Because now I'm looking through with this new sense of self that isn't how it was designed to be, okay? Why does that matter? This impurity is a barrier to us seeing God even, right? Think of your own family. Think of some kind of event in your life, in your history, where because of your way of thinking that was not pure, you totally misunderstood someone in your family and you thought the worst of them because of how you were thinking, where you found out you were mistaken. I've done this tons, right? I've done it not just with family, I've done this to so many people, right? Where I've assumed something because I think that way, because I have that negative in me, right? And then I projected it out to somebody else and assessed them and judged them and viewed them in a negative way. That's what impurity does to your relationships with God and with others, right? Like just think of that and it becomes real to you, that it's no longer just this hypothetical. And this happens a lot with God. Well, how come God this? How come God that? I missed that cat. Sorry. So this is why we need to protect our minds and bodies from the wrong kind of knowledge or the wrong time for that knowledge, right? And that, to go back, Christina, to my vague question, this is what I mean about health, is saying, how do I fix it, right? If I've become less healthy, how do I recover it? If I'm already kind of healthy, how do I maintain it? If I want to get even healthier, how do I achieve it, right? And it's about finding these sources of impurities, finding these vices and virtues that have gone wrong, right? Because if you look at Adam and Eve, to go back to our origins, when they took the knowledge of the tree early, because they were going to get it eventually, what happened? They viewed God differently, right? It was suddenly like, oh, God doesn't want us to be like that. Suddenly, even though they were chilling with God day and night, suddenly they were like, hide, hide. Suddenly, even though they were walking around in their birthday suits like it was nothing, suddenly they were like, oh, maybe we should cover ourselves. Keep in mind, God never said any of those to them. God never said, I won't give you the knowledge. God never said, hi, God was chilling with them. God never said, clothe yourselves or nakedness is shameful. They did. Right? And that this lack of purity, this thing that taints us, this water that got murky, when you start looking for it, you start assessing wrongly, right? So when you start looking through it, and it's like if I were to put on that weird effect on the camera right now, actually, let's do it to make a point, because it's fun. Where is these effects? Okay, if I were to do this, okay, if this is now how I view the world, this is really fun. I like it. The way that I view everything is now different. How I assess space is now different. And if I'm trying to view the world like this distortion of reality is real, I might find myself walking into walls because I'm misjudging the distance, right? So that's what sin does. That's what impurity does, okay? So we have to learn how to see right. And that's what we're saying, we have to learn to see through the gospel. So let's bring it back to another saying, again, about wine. They used to say about Abba Pavnutius that he would not readily drink wine. On one occasion, he came by chance upon a band of thieves, and he found them drinking. And the captain of the thieves recognized him and knew that he never drank wine. So St. Pachomius, he's known, this guy doesn't drink. This thief is a local, he's heard of the guy. He knows that Abba Pachomius doesn't drink. He's like, interesting. This is the guy who doesn't drink. So this thief looks at Pachomius and saw that he's a man of great ascetic works. And the captain filled a cup with wine, and taking a sword in his hand, he said to the man, if you don't drink this, I'll kill you. And the old man knew that the grace of God wanted to work on the captain of the thieves through him, and he sought to do him a good deed. So he took the cup and drank it. Then the captain of the thieves apologizes and says, forgive me, Father, for distressing you. And the old man said to him, I believe by God that through this cup, God will forgive you your sins. And the captain of the thieves said to him, I believe by God from this time forth, I will never trouble anybody again. Thus, because for God's sake, Pavnutius gave up his own wish, he was able to do good to all the band of thieves. So this talk is supposed to be about asceticism. So my question, please answer to the best of your ability. Why was he never drinking wine? Why was Pachomius just not drinking wine? If wine's not evil, clearly it's not evil. God turned water into wine. They're drinking it in a bunch of stories. So if wine's not evil, why is this guy not drinking wine? And don't worry, the message today is not to not drink wine. But what is the reason Pachomius isn't drinking wine? Somebody go for it. Just ideas. You don't have to be right or wrong.
Could it be because he knows himself and he thinks he has like an addictive personality or something, and so that drinking wine could sort of lead him down a bad path? Or
Excellent.
alternatively, not to be like a stumbling block to other people who might have an issue with wine.
Excellent. Okay, so possibly worry for himself, possibly to avoid being an offense to others. What else might be a reason?
He sees no benefit to it.
Great. He sees no benefit. Anyone else?
Avoid having a distortion in his view on what he's experiencing or how he views things during that moment.
Excellent. Right? All of these are possible answers. right? We actually don't know why specifically Pachomius did, but all of these are valid reasons, right? Where just because something's not wrong doesn't mean a person might not subjectively still feel like it's a bad idea. So it's not because it's evil. Actually, we have a quote from Abba Pimen from the Desert Fathers, something I almost want to assign you guys an exercise of reading and saying a night. Maybe I'll throw some in the WhatsApp group when I'm back on later today. But actually, Abba Pimen, one of the greatest Desert Fathers, says the nature of wine is not such as to make it useful to the dwellers in the monastery. So that's another reason. Just saying it's not useful. He's like, it's just not its context, right? Whereas it is useful for some of the monks in Siberia. I don't know if you guys know that, but a lot of the Russian Orthodox monks in Siberia, they'll drink vodka to keep warm, like regularly. So let's look at another saying. I'm going to use this, all of us, to go somewhere with all of this. A certain man came to one of the holy men who was a companion of his, who cooked a few lentils. And one of the two said to him, okay, this story is actually ridiculous. I think it's hilarious. Okay, so two monks getting together and they cook some ads, okay? And one of the two says, how about, we pray part of the service, okay? And so then they go and read literally the whole book of Psalms. This companion repeats two of the books of the great prophets. We're talking about Isaiah, Jeremiah, like these ridiculously long books. This is all after they've cooked. This is their prep for eating. I would never do this. And then this lasts all night, because it says, and when it was morning, the elder departed his own place, and they forgot about the food. And the old man went another evening and found the food that had been cooked, and he was sorry and said, oh, how did we forget this little mess of lentils and not eat it? Okay, why am I using this story? Do I think you guys are going to walk out of here and suddenly be reciting Psalms to another? If you do, that's great. I hope so, but I doubt that's what's going to happen. But asceticism, we said, is about a spiritual workout. It's about striving for excellence. It's about getting jacked. It's about fixing things, okay? So here was a discipline of Psalms that somehow this person had reached a level that when they had this discipline of Psalms, it was able to make him not need something else, right? He cooked because he was hungry. He didn't cook for fun. But somehow when he got disciplined, he felt he didn't need it. And I think you guys can all relate to that, right? How many times have you been really feeling a sense of urgency about something and got so distracted by something that you like that you forgot about the thing that you felt was urgent originally, right? How many of you, while gaming, have not realized that 3 or 4 hours passed and that you were hungry and didn't eat, right? That there is such thing as getting so into something that you don't need something else. If you actively love your spouse, what I'm trying to get at, you'll be less prone to adultery, right? When you make your being and your meaning more about this thing that you love or this person that you love, you're going to be less likely already to commit adultery, because it's not a thing on your mind, because your time, your energy, your focus is always directed at this one person, that it becomes less likely that you're going to commit adultery. Not impossible, but just less likely, right? If you actively try and love your job and make the most of it, you're not likely to wander from career to career, right? If where you are in your job, you're always being like, oh, I love this. How could I love it more? How could I make this better? How could I get better at this task? How can I care about my staff, my team, my coworkers, my subordinates, my superiors? You're going to be less likely to wander. If you actively look for ways to love your family, you will despise them less and wish you had a different one less. Right? If you're looking for the good in your family and how to please your family and how to enjoy your family, you're going to hate them less. The point here is that occupying yourself with something can prevent another thing from happening. Right? There's a billion things that can come from discipline beyond what you might think when you first do it. Right? That's what I'm trying to get at, is that Lent is a time, but the whole year is a time that Lent is like a super focused time for it. that when I'm trying to do something, I start to benefit from discipline, things that I don't know that I benefit, right? Just by being disciplined, right? It's like, there's a period where I lived in Thunder Bay for my student rotations when I was at the end of pharmacy school. I love up north. I hate schedules. I'm not a schedule guy, but I was like, I sometimes need them, and when I need them, I go back to them. Scheduling is a sign that I need to get some order again. I made a schedule for myself there. And what I did not know, so in 4 months, I ended up reading the whole Bible, was cross-country skiing almost every single day, was hiking at least 3 or 4 times a week, was still socializing with friends, was getting all of my school demands for my rotations done, read secular books that I liked, and I played a particular geeky video game that I like called Caesar 3 regularly. And I journaled. I don't know how that happened, because days didn't change, right? What I'm trying to get at is I didn't know that was possible, right? That the discipline did something, and I actually legit had a good time, right? It wasn't like I was miserable, woe is me, I have a schedule. But that when we discipline, right, it changes things. We find ourselves different. We find ourselves growing. A certain brother was hungry one morning, and he fought against his inclination and determined not to eat till the 3rd hour. So that's 9 a.m. Okay. When the 3rd hour had passed, he dipped his bread in water. He's like, okay, I told myself I'm going to make it till 9. This is 9 a.m. And I want you to realize that in monastic world, 9 a.m. is weak sauce, right? No one fasts till 9 a.m., right? All these monks are probably showing off that they go 2 or 3 days without eating, but they're not going to eat before like 6 in the evening, right? But this guy is dying at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. comes, he's dipping his bread in water, this like illustrious meal. He sits down to eat, and he's like, you know what? Let's wait till noon. And then noon arrives, and he says, you know, let's wait till 3 p.m. And when 3 p.m. had come, he prayed, and he saw the working of Satan rising up before him like smoke, and he suppressed his desire to eat, and his hunger passed from him. Why am I using this example? This asceticism, this workout, this intentional saying no to myself, to something that's not even wrong, right? Like the point here is not that something's wrong, is that it helps you work against your lusts. This guy's fasting, by him not indulging the senses, helps him delay the thing he wanted. That helps us delay a sin, right? I hear so often people saying things like, what's the point of fasting? Fasting's never going to help me. But I'll hear similarly people say things like, oh, I would never cheat. I would never fall for this person's advances. I would never lie. I would never steal. I would never fraud. How do you know? Like, really, how do you know? If you have no self-control over these really trivial things like what time you eat, if you have never developed your ability to say no, why do you think that you could? Because I used to be super disciplined. I'm not anymore. That's why I don't have a problem saying that out loud, because I'm not boasting. I suck at it now. Now, I never thought in my life, let me confess a sin publicly to you guys. This was wrong, and I did it. And it just shows how your mind can change when you lose that discipline. When I was working, I worked at a company where you have to swipe your card for your hours, right? Now, I started off by saying to myself, I did this, and this, and this for the company off the clock. I am owed X amount of time. So it started off feeling justified, right? So I'm like, I'm going to not swipe out when I go out to do this so that I can make up the time that is owed to me, right? that progressed into just outright time theft, to be honest, where I'd leave for something and there's no longer anything owed to me. I could just get away with it, right? Or I didn't build this thing, I'll build this. And I think it's something I never thought I would do, regardless of whether you think that I'm right or wrong is irrelevant. I'm sure it was wrong, right? But it was things that I didn't think that I would do. And so if we don't practice saying no to ourselves, God knows when we're going to say no for the trivial thing. What happens when you're at work and someone's making an advance at you? And I'm using that as an example because I've seen it in real life a lot with people who come for confession. Now, what happens if you're in a fight with your spouse and that person is giving you attention? What happens, forgive me, I'm going to be really real here. What happens if you're in a disagreement with your wife about frequency of sexual relations, for example? Sorry, I'm getting explicit, but I want the example to be real because I've seen this as real examples more than once. And so suddenly the person who's making advances that you've been rejecting in your moment of weakness becomes, well, your spouse doesn't care about you and this person does. Don't you deserve a break for once? But what fasting does, right? This guy who's saying, I'm not going to eat till 9, I'm not going to eat till 3, I'm not going to eat till 6. He's practicing, he's flexing, if we want to use the health analogy, just like you can do exercises that strengthen your bicep muscle. This person is working out his self-control muscle, right? Of saying, I want to practice my ability to say no. I'm mastering this. I'm going to be able to say no when I need to say no. The only way to learn how to say no is by saying no, right? That's what fasting is. Fasting is saying no to something, not because it's necessarily wrong. We're supposed to always be fasting from things that are wrong, things that are evil. But the act of fasting that we're doing is saying, no, it's not wrong. I just want to learn how to not do it. Okay? So to bring it back to this whole love thing, what do you do proactively to show love? Those are acts of romance. That might be cooking dinner for your family, for your spouse, for your parents, for your sibling even. Saying, you know what? I know this person is going to come home hungry. And I don't owe them to make them dinner, but I'm going to. I want to show them that I think about them. I want to show them that I value them. I want to show them that I put my time at their service instead of my own. It is, as Mark put earlier, buying a gift outside of a special occasion to show that you value them, right? A gift at a birthday is to some extent expected, but a gift for no reason, that's not as expected, right? I'll tell you, my sister really affected me with the tiniest thing once. She had just graduated from university and started working, and I was still a student. And Christine just randomly, excitedly comes to me, and she bought me a really expensive pair of shoes, like for no reason. And it was her first paycheck. And I remember being really just like moved by that, of being like, I don't think I would have done that. Like, I don't think my first thought with my first paycheck in any way would have been, let me get my siblings something, right? And she was so excited. And it entered me so deeply what she did that literally 2 years later, when I graduated, I was adamant on doing the exact same thing, right? And I could take no credit for it because it was my sister, right? But that's how much of an impact that act of love had, where she just chose this random act, right? I went and did it for her and my brother, and then my brother did the same for me. And it showed how this love grows, right? Like that it ends up making things get out there, where it's like, okay, what can we do to do things? So proactively showing love, that's another form of asceticism, right? Recognizing a partner's mood before it happens and giving the comfort they might have rather than your own. What do I mean by that? Whether it's your spouse, your brother, your sister, your friend, right? Where you know, for example, they're going through a rough time. So you know they're going to come home miserable, right? So you have the choice of being like, oh, great, they're bringing their bad mood home from work again. Or it can be, I know they're going to come home upset because they're going through a rough time. I really want to talk about my own issues, but we're not today because this person needs it more. Right? Today I'm gonna let them vent. And if the venting calms them down and then I can vent too, great. But if it doesn't, no problem. This is asceticism. Like that's what I think you guys don't maybe recognize the romance of it. But this is what asceticism is saying. I'm actively working out something. I'm actively giving something. And those are your thoughts, your emotions, your time. It's not just your diet, right? Or imagine driving home to your wife on mat leave and saying, you know what? I know I'm exhausted because of work, but my wife must be exhausted from the kids. How can I alleviate her when I get home? Right? Even though I'm exhausted, I'm gonna enter the house and I'm gonna say, you know what? Go take a time out. You've had the kids at your hips literally all day. Go take a breather. I've got this for the next half hour to an hour. Like that can do wonders, right? That can do wonders. So it's about recognizing these different ways to proactively show love, right? It doesn't have to be wife kids example. It can be, you know what? I noticed that mom's been exhausted lately. I'm just gonna sweep and mop today, right? This person, like, dad's being annoyed that my brother is playing the music too loud. I'm gonna buy my brother a headset, sound like a good, expensive sound canceling headset, so that they both get what they want, right? These are, again, it's an ascetic work. It's a self-discipline. It's a self-denial, okay? On one occasion, there's an offering made in the mountain of St. Antony, the best saint in the world, and a skin of wine was there. And one of the monks took some of it in a small vessel, and with a cup in his hand, he went and carried it to Abba Shishoy, the same guy from above, and he mixed him a cupful, and he drank it, and he mixed a second cup, and he took it and drank it. But when he mixed the third time, Abba Shishoy refused and said, "Stay your hand, brother. Don't you know that the third cup is of Satan?" That's the quote I think you're talking about, Peter, earlier, I think. And the discipline here, we're talking about asceticism during Lent, is not saying yes just because you can. Saying all this as ways that we can form our asceticism this Lent, right? That it's not eating more just because there's room in your stomach, right? It's not saying yes to something someone's offering you just because they're offering it. It's being able to say no even to that, to excess, to being able to learn how to not be lavish, right? Because the more you get used to being pampered, it's very hard for you not to be, right? Like, I never in my life thought I'd have an espresso machine. And now it's hard for me to drink normally, right? It's such a small thing, right? But I had no problem as a student firing up the kettle, getting my tea thing ready and washing my cup. Now I'm like, no, where's my dishwasher? Where's my dishwasher? Where's my Nespresso? You know what? Why should I even use the microwave? I should use one of those, whatever they're called, Aerochino, whatever chino thing that heats your milk, right? But like, and I love it, right? But when we get used to, yes, we can because we can, why not? I have enough money. Why not? I have enough time. Why not? I have blah, 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 blah. When that becomes our mentality, you don't know how to be uncomfortable anymore. And your ability to love diminishes, right? When social media becomes our way of getting affirmation, which it has. How many likes do you get? How many retweets do you get? How many views did you get? How many people think you're a god? you get used to comfort that if somebody dares to say they disagree with you, people have really dramatic reactions today to disagreement, right? How dare you tell me you think they're wrong? Who do they think they are, right? And then we suddenly get all worked up, right? That how dare somebody not believe that I'm God? So saying no to that third cup is saying, enough. Let me decide how much I'm going to have. What does that look like practically? Lent is not just about eating and fasting food. It's also about abstinence, but it's also not about pigging out when we do. This isn't fitor. Like, sorry, like I'm not making fun of Muslims, right? But a Muslim fast, you abstain and then you pig out at the end of the day. We're not supposed to be doing that because gluttony is supposed to be a sin still in the fast and outside of the fast, right? So that even when I do come to eat, do I pig out or do I eat what is sufficient? Okay. If a king wants to subdue a city from desert fathers, first of all, he keeps them without bread and water, and the enemy being in this wise harassed by hunger becomes subject to him. And so it is in respect of hostile passions. If a man endures fasting and hunger regularly, his enemies become stricken with weakness in the soul. What this desert father is saying, that your asceticism, this fasting, is the equivalent of starving out your enemy in real old school war, right? Cut off the supply line. If I can cut off the supply line, he starves out, it's done, right? And so it is there, right? If you learn how to cut off your self-gratification, people tempting you to gratify you won't be as powerful to you because you lost interest, you cut them off, right? I'll give an example because I live this life as a way of life. One of the recommendations for monastics is that before they enter the monastery, that they've worked for a bit and made money. Why? Because when you've laid down the money ascetically, it doesn't tempt you very much, right? So if somebody comes to a monk to offer them $100 if they do this or that or the other thing, it doesn't have that effect on them when they've had that experience, because they've already tasted it, right? Where it's like, oh, I don't really care about your money. So the devil has gone up in smoke. He's been starved out because that's not going to be an entry, right? But we're trying to find those things. So I'm going to fast forward because I know I've been talking too long for you guys, and my bad. I want to bring up the example of Saint Bishoy. I want to give like just a couple of stories about Saint Bishoy. Because Saint Bishoy, when I was young, I thought he was crazy. I thought he was like, I loved him, but I also thought he was crazy, right? When I read the story of him tying his hair to the ceiling, I'm like, that's stupid. I'm like, why would anybody do that? Like, that's not a thing. And what kind of God is expecting us to sit there with our hair tied to the ceiling so we don't fall asleep? Like, this is some kind of masochistic thing. That's just weird. I want to reframe it and ask, for any of you who have been obsessed with someone or something, if you've been up till really late messaging or playing or doing something because you're enjoying your time, knowing that you're going to be wrecked in the morning when you have work or school or whatever it is. I know I have. Where you're just enjoying it so much where you're like, I don't want to fall asleep. Like, keep going, right? So you might make yourself a cup of coffee, right? You might do something, but you're trying to make sure you don't fall asleep while you're texting your significant other, right? While you're chilling with your friends, you're doing whatever you can. And how many of you, because you don't want to have that FOMO, right? That you fell asleep when everybody at the retreat was staying up till 4 or 5 in the morning, right? Exactly, at WCYC on the rooftop, right? That's a real thing. That's what Saint Bishoy was doing. Saint Bishoy wasn't tying his hair to the ceiling because God wanted him to. He wasn't saying, here's a new way I can show exciting love. Check out this new move, Lord. Like he's like a little cat where he learned a new trick, or a dog, right? He's like, no, I don't want to sleep. I want to text you all night. I want to talk to you all night long. So I'm doing this to make sure that I stay awake. So it started off as romantic, and it was probably also practical, right? Like his hair was stupid long, right? That maybe just like, you know what, this is easier. Let me tie this up. So that he could concentrate and get it out of the way. There's a practical part and there's a romantic part. So think about practically how you can show this. Imagine if you can't work Sundays because your work is saying no, if you don't have any sense of asceticism. If you have no sense of asceticism, you're going to choose working Sundays over not, because you've learned to prioritize body, secular, other than spirit. You won't even know how to say no to it. It won't even be a thought in your head. I'm like, ah, what can you do? Guess I gotta. It won't even be an internal conflict. It'll be like, guess I can't, because you haven't practiced. Imagine I can't give my tithes because I don't have checkbooks. I can't pray today because I got home late. I can't read the Bible because I can't find the version that I like. Right? There's all these things. If we don't practice these things, those just become non-starters. They're done. But I want to say a different story about Saint Bishoy so that you guys understand the point of asceticism. It's a story that's not as well known. That's in his life, written by his BFF, Saint John the Short. Saint Bishoy had started a monastery and he was fasting and praying. He's denying the senses. It gave him clarity, purity, blah, blah, blah. Now, a nobleman had an angel appear to him. Sorry. This isn't what I was reading. I'll find it after. The story that I wanted to tell was Christ himself appears to Saint Bishoy. And Saint Bishoy's saying to God, God, I have a problem. I get really pissed off. This is not what you're expecting from Saint Bishoy. This is the guy tying his hair to the ceiling, the guy who can go days without eating. He started his own monastery. The whole world sees him as the biggest guru in the world. And the Lord of hosts has appeared to him, and he says, I pray you, Lord, rid me of one weakness, anger. Now, I want you to listen carefully to what the Lord himself answered with, because most of us think he's going to be like, ta-da! And from that day forth, Bishoy struggled with anger no longer. That's not what happened. The Lord replied to him and says, if you want to vanquish anger, be careful not to reproach, insult, or criticize anyone. If you persist at this, your anger will be controlled. He gave him an ascetic work to do, a self-denial to do. If you want to flex this virtue, if you want to be healthy, if you want to get this virtue, you have to fight this disease that's in you, or have this physical exercise to bring it back to the health analogy of saying, here's the reasons you get this vice. When you talk too much, when you criticize people, when you insult people, when you presume yourself to know, you end up getting anger. Why? Because you learn how to gratify you. You learn how to value your opinions, your mood, your time, your everything over this other person's. So when someone challenges it, you don't know how to deal with it. So you want to recover this? Don't be a jerk. Watch your tongue. Fast from free speech. Right? It's a particular kind of fasting. So becoming an ascetic is like becoming a bodybuilder. It's like becoming a professional competitor in any discipline. Okay, it can mean striving for the highest thing. It can mean contenting yourself with the minimum, right? But it's work. Like that first line we read, it's work. And the goal of it is to excel at restoring ourselves to this image and likeness. The goal of it is the beginning, to tie it all together, aligning our human spirit with the Holy Spirit, right? It's to bring it back to this pure cup, this seeing purely. And it's about something even further, about being in love with the divine lover, with this jealous lover who cares for us. All right. So that's what I wanted to talk about, because this is the season for it. This is the season where you need to find out, what am I going to do this Lent? What am I going to work out? What muscle am I going to try and work out? And what vice am I going to try and uproot? Right? And this is the time to go for it. It could be this time to work on your favorite sin. I don't know if it's on the WhatsApp, if you guys sent the Lent program in the WhatsApp group or not. Perfect. I know that might be daunting for a lot of people, because this was originally written to people that I've been working on this with for years. So don't view it and be like, I can't do all this, no problem. Right? But with your confession father, with somebody, with your spiritual director, choose something from it. Right? And find a way to do it. Practice fasting, regardless of what your opinion is of fasting. Right? If you only fasted a week before, try 2 this year. I suggest that those of you who never fasted at all, start with Holy Week. But maybe consider, if you don't fast Wednesdays and Fridays, beginning one of those during Lent. Right? And hopefully you can keep it after Lent. Like, where if you started off with Wednesdays, of saying, okay, and after Lent, I'm going to keep fasting Wednesdays. I'm not ready for Friday yet. No problem, but have some kind of guidance with it, because Lent is that workout period. Okay? And I really want to encourage you guys to do a lot more self-examination during Lent, right? What is it that I do? Okay, that's causing me to be sick, that's making me not in the image and likeness, so we can zoom in on it, because there's so many different kinds of fasting. Fasting of will, fasting of body, fasting from money, right? Like, if I spend too much living on a budget, less than what I make. Fasting from decision-making, from controlling, from sleeping in, from podcasts, from excessive service, from optional things. There's so many things, okay? So this Lent, let's get on it, and recover that discipline, recover that health. I'm going to end with a saying, and then open it up to question. They used to say about Abba Dioscorus that his bread was made of barley and lentils, and that at the beginning of each year, he would set himself some new task of ascetic excellence, saying, this year, I won't hold any conversation with or visit any man, for example. This is a monastic thing. Or I will not speak at all. Or I'm not going to eat food that's been boiled. Or I won't eat any fruit. Or I won't eat any vegetable. He began each year with resolutions of this kind and carried them out. And each year he set himself some new task. So that's your Lenten challenge. Let's do that, right? Choose a challenge that you can see as discipline, right? The person who says, I'm going to go on the treadmill every day, has different feelings about it as time progresses. Some days they like, sometimes they hate, sometimes they're ambivalent, sometimes they're whatever. But when it's done consistently, that's only then that you can see what it does. Only then can you assess whether it's done anything over that long consistency. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Any questions or comments about all this stuff before we get into the meetings, dates, times, and all that kind of jazz? Any meditations for any of you guys, from the servants, for any of you guys?
I have a question, Abuna, if that's okay.
Go for it.
It's 2 parts. Part 1, how do you keep going if you fall a lot? So if you cheat on your fast, or how do you not lose hope in your own ability if you keep falling? And part 2, could you reach a stage where you're very good at fasting, but you still cannot say no to whatever sin that you're struggling with?
To the first one, I would say not to overthink it, because inevitably, like, we are gonna fall. I just shouldn't plan for those falls. So my advice to people is usually treat every individual warfare as its own, every individual battle as its own, right? Because if I look at the individual battle in the context of a greater thing, I'm gonna probably tend either to egoism on one extreme or despair on the other. Because if it's been going really, really well, then I'm gonna be on the ego side. Or if I've sucked a bunch of times, I might be on the despair side. Whereas the reality is I'm right here, right now. I have this option immediately in front of me. What is going to be my Christian choice? What does one in the image and likeness of God do right now? If I lose, I lose. But I don't let it move past the I lost right now. Right? Because once I do that, I lose the whole mentality of war. Imagine, that's why I love the war, like imagery and analogies always for spiritual life, and I'm going to use it over and over. If I'm in the middle of a battle, if my mind is on previous battles, I'm not in the battle. I'm going to lose. Right? And I might lose a battle, but the battle is also not the war. And so if I lose one, no problem. The war is not done. But I also, if I'm injured in battle, I'm a good guy. I just go get help. Right? If I die in battle, I'm a hero. You might get a highway named after me. Right? So it's keep it in its context. Okay. But I'd also couple with it is the spiritual guidance part, because and that connects to your second question, because if I'm really good at quote unquote fasting, but still falling, it might be that I need a particular kind of fast that matches what my actual warfare is, right? So for example, I only got into TV in the last year, personally. I was never a TV guy, I was a movie guy. So when my priest would give out exercises of fasting from TV, it was so irrelevant to me because it's not even an interest of mine, right? So I have no problem fasting from TV, right? But I was addicted like in the last 7 years, I've been addicted to podcasts, right? Like that's been something that I do all the time, right? So I might need a different kind of fast, right? Same thing with sins of the tongue, sins of whatever it is, that I might need a different kind of discipline, right? Because I'll give you an example just to illustrate it. Evagrius talks about despondency. Actually, was one of the first talks we had here in Vancouver on the Friday night at SMSP. That despondency is not a problem with a way of thinking. And so if I start trying to help somebody through a way of thinking, I won't fix their despondency, right? What they need to fast from is time spent on themselves. And so what I mean is, if I'm trying to fight a certain battle by fasting from a thing that doesn't affect it, then it's going to be useless. And that's where the spiritual guidance part, I think, comes in.
Makes sense. Thank you, Abuna. Nice to have you back. We missed you.
I missed you guys, actually. Anyone else?
You need to get a different background, Abuna.
It's dark, huh?
Black is like interrupting, intruding on you.
So my huh is so American because I used to make fun of them for saying huh all the time, and now I say it nonstop, which I have to fast from because I thought it was the dumbest noise in the world, and then now it's like my go-to. Okay, so let me pull up. I'm kind of excited. Okay, I'm putting a link here for you guys to do. So I know I kept saying there's a website going up, and I promise you it wasn't my fault that it wasn't going up. It was a whole bunch of things. So right now that is linked to this, is going straight to the schedule. When I'm done the website, which God willing will be up within a week with the content, blogs and sermons and all that kind of jazz, there's a section just called YVR. Where the schedule and stuff is on there. So I've actually missed you guys like crazy. For those of you who came in late, I'm really sorry, and it's gonna happen again. When I'm in California, I have to go into California mode and vice versa. But I am back, and I'm gonna be catching up on messages and all that kind of jazz. So I'm now back, thank God. I'm still trying to figure out the COVID restrictions and non-restrictions and all of that. The way that the schedule should work is we've played around. We had the survey results. I agree with the survey results, and we're all trying to figure out what to do with COVID and non-COVID and all that jazz. Now, this whole switching from St. Mark's to St. Mary's to St. George's for this meeting just wasn't working. Like if anything, it just made attendance weaker. That doesn't mean we're not going to do things at all the churches. Of course, we're going to do things at all the churches. I just mean I want to figure out a way to not make this thing weird. So for now, I think it made the most sense from the survey results, from what all of you guys said, from all of the churches, like, because it was almost unanimous from everybody. We're going to leave the meetings on Sundays at St. George's. Now, having said that, there's still going to be the weekly meeting. I might not be at every meeting because the first and last Sunday of the month I've dedicated to St. Mary's and St. George's in different ways, right? So I'm leaving it up to the service of each church for how they want to do that. So far, St. Mary's, what's been going on there has been a general meeting after that a lot of you guys are at. So that's cool for those of you who want to be there. I encourage everybody to be at all the churches because we should. But I also understand that Sundays are going to be difficult with what you do with your families and all of that. So there's no pressure. So what I'm trying to do is kind of focus on a different thing at each parish. So for example, St. Mary's, the first and third Tuesdays are going to be the Bible study, which I really, really encourage you guys to come to. I'm obsessed with Bible. And they're going to be streamed online as well. So the Bible studies I'm doing there, and the first Tuesday of the month, I got the blessings of Mbamina to do the liturgy that we talked about. Mbamina prefers that it be called a spiritual night, and that it also have in it midnight praises and spiritual songs for those who like. So I'm going to talk with Tante Nancy, who's on here, thank God. And I know Tante Nancy probably wants to throw arrows into my brain. But we'll talk to Nancy and Uncle Megan and Abun Antonius about the schedule for that. I'm really excited about the midnight liturgy, especially, so we're going to finish shortly after midnight because canonically it needs to. So I really encourage you guys to come. I want this liturgy. This is where I'm expressing my preference. I'm open to discussion, but my preference is that this be in English. I would also really urge you to invite your friends who might have felt estranged from church for a while. My experience with these liturgies, I like to do these like with minimal lighting, not because that makes it more spiritual, but I like it to recover. I call it the Cave Liturgy because something that really affected me in my own spiritual life was when I started praying liturgies with the Wound of Lazarus in St. Anthony's Cave. It gives it a different feel when you're focused. You're not as distracted by the lights, by the imagery, by the moving, by the coming in and the going out. It did something, and I want to recover that. And so because there's not this big hoopla after, like there is on Sundays of like, go eat in the kitchen, go do this, go do that, Sunday school, youth meeting, all that, that's not there. It gives it a different tone. So those of you who have been estranged, those of you, for example, who might, because of the kids, not being able to have a quiet liturgy for a while, these are a really good place to do that and to reconnect and to get some peace of mind. So that's my preference. I'm open to discussion. I want to communicate that. I will when I talk to Tante Nancy and Uncle Megan with the deacons as well. But I want to view this, like all the services, as not belonging to a place. None of you guys have given me that vibe. So I'm not saying that politically, like somebody said or done something. I haven't gotten that vibe at all. I've actually only genuinely, I'm not even trying to be nice, only seen kindness and love like from everybody. So I'm excited about this. That's what I'm trying to get at, is that even if it's at St. Mary's, I don't want it to be viewed as this belongs to St. Mary's, only St. Mary. That's not a thing, right? This is the night liturgy. That's why if you look at the way that I've written the schedule, I differentiated a service that belongs specifically to the church by saying St. Mary's, St. George, SMSP, versus at St. M's, at St. G's, at whatever. Because the at is simply saying this is a Vancouver thing that happens to be located here. And that's all, right? And so that liturgy is a good place for that. That'll be the first Tuesday of the month. Satan has said for now to only do one. Maybe, God willing, over time. I am more than happy for Bible study and liturgy to eventually become a weekly thing. Personally, I think it's great and I think it does wonders, but we'll start low, go slow, as they say in the healthcare world. That'll be Tuesday. So St. Mary's focus